Being people focused can be very process oriented, can be very rewarding from that check the box perspective too. Hey, there is a difference between getting results and being people focused. I know why, because some people are so people focused, they don't get results. Or some people are so results, they don't get people focused. And the problem is if you mix them together, that's actually what we're trying to do.
Planting the seed so people understand where we're going and what we're trying to do, but also using data. Giving them these things is putting them first.
You have to include the people who do the work. You have to include them from beginning to end. It's giving them a structure and a foresight into knowing exactly what comes next, to take the guesswork out of it, knowing that if we incorporate the process as it's created, it will bring them along.
Hello and welcome to the Lean Solutions Podcast. I'm going to be your host today, Shane Daughenbaugh. I'm very excited to have you here with us. And as we get started, I want to have you do a little bit of an exercise with me. I want you to gaze off into the distance and imagine. Imagine being on a team or in an organization where everything looks efficient on paper. Like there's great looking KPIs, goals are being met, metrics are all over the place, and they're looking just smashing. But when you lift the lid or look behind the curtain a little bit, in reality, you see a different story. You see a story where no one feels heard, where decisions are dragged out. So therefore, there's always a crisis trying to meet deadlines, and where the energy, frankly, is just kind of flat or maybe even gone. Not a great place to be. Now, I want you to look the other direction and gaze off into the distance the other direction. And this time, I want you to flip the image. So I want you to imagine where you're in a workplace where people actually want to show up, where ideas flow, where results don't just happen, but they happen better. Now, in this scenario, I want to tell you what the difference is between these two, because what's really driving this is not the process, is not driving the success, but instead it's the people. And I want to share with you, I have this great opportunity right now in this podcast to bring in a very good friend of mine and mentor from my previous role at the state of Nebraska. And I want to share how putting people first always is the better way to go. Because when I was hired on to the state of Nebraska, and I have to give my mentor and friend kudos for great judgment and great taste as well in hiring me. What I experienced, and I'm only speaking from my experience, I experienced being invested in, and in this situation, my mentor put the focus on me and spent time with me, spent energy with me, gave me the knowledge that he had so that I could also turn around and then put people first in the different agencies that I worked at. And in doing so, we were able to create this great, really great culture where, because we're able to put the people first and investing in them, that's where the progress and success was that we've talked about here on this podcast before. So I want to introduce you to my good friend, Matt Singh. Matt, thanks so much for coming. I am very jazzed to have you here on this show. And let me give our listening audience and our watching audience here just a little bit of background about you. Matt Singh is the Senior Manager for Operational Excellence at Children's Nebraska Hospital. He's the former Director of Operational Excellence and Master Black Belt for the Department of Administrative Services in the state of Nebraska. Over the last 20 years, Matt has served in a variety of progressive management roles, including sales and service, operations, and supply chain. He is a certified Master Black Belt in Six Sigma, a Master Black Belt in Lean Six Sigma, a certified Lean Sensei, and holds the Project Management Professional Credential, PMP. So, Matt, thanks so much for being here on the show. I am jazzed.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
So, Matt, we have some great history going back, and now you're in a little bit different of a place from, working in state government for, I don't know, what was it, about 8 years?
Mm-hmm.
to now you are at a very large healthcare facility and working there. What are some of the differences just right off the top? Or are there any significant differences to how you approach lean in state government and how you approach lean in the healthcare system that you're in right now?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of similarities, but some key differences that popped up within the first year. I've been here a little over a year now, and got to work on a lot of projects so far at the enterprise level, usually for the officers, the senior vice presidents, vice presidents, this kind of stuff. So very similar to what I did at the state. So you get to see kind of the complexity of the systems, complexity of the culture. I'd say one of the biggest differences I noticed is that in government, when we're doing continuous improvement, there's a lot of precursor information we need to walk through with the people we're going to be doing process improvement with.
Sure.
Some have never gone through formal leadership training before, so we go through things like communication, things like listening, coaching, feedback, this kind of stuff.
Right.
Also, we lay a lot of the groundwork, planting the seeds for many people in my 8-year experience of planting the seeds for the first time of, hey, this can be done better. This can be, there's this whole methodology called Lean Six Sigma. And yeah, I know the status quo works, but we can do better as an organization. I was pleasantly caught by surprise when I came to Children's in Nebraska, doing pretty much the same stuff just in healthcare. And it was a little bit different because I found a lot of the stuff that I set out to do in a meeting or the precursor work leading up to a big meeting was done for me. They tend
What do you mean by that? Like you had an assistant, or
the common culture here is very much, but I think it's because you have the actual patients, and whether you're on the administrative side or the clinical side,
right?
Every day we have thousands of patients coming through here, so it's very easy to stay focused on the end goal, which is not a TPS report, but someone's life, several people's lives.
Right.
And so there's kind of that unity as a team that collaborative efforts just starts out of 1 out of 10, it starts at a 9, even before people know each other, because we all understand why we're in the room. Like, even if we don't know what continuous improvement is, we know why we're there, is we're trying to make it better. In government, not that mindset wasn't there, but that's not necessarily the shared understanding of why we were in any specific meeting walking into the room, unless you were already trained, unless you already knew why you were there, unless you already knew the precursors to the project that's going on, then right. you might get that. You might not. You might need to explain, and that's okay. That's not better or worse, but it's definitely a major difference I noticed in healthcare versus the state.
Right.
Another one here is I noticed in when I was in government, whether it be with Nebraska state government or some of the consulting activities on the side, is data. That was a big one for me. Is data. In government, there's a lot of buckets that they're not used to metrics per se at all levels of organization. There's not alignment of metrics, and there's not a lot of data to pull upon. You remember a lot of the projects that we did together where we basically had to go out there with time studies and your day forms and go through systems to see if we could figure out which reports to use, timestamps and emails. We had to kind of create the data based off of what we had. Healthcare, there's so much data because it's based off like an academic environment. A lot of these people that are directors are also professors at local universities and institutions.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
In the talent pipeline for, becoming a doctor, the educational background, they come and spend time here for a year or two, kind of doing their rounds to learn the different elements of hands-on, doctorship, medical stuff. Doctor stuff. So I think those are two big ones that really popped out at me is kind of laying that groundwork, but then also the data. Things like, one of the big things we implemented in state was like, hey, let's do some customer surveys, or call it whatever you want, but essentially a customer survey, whether it be you and me doing a project for a cabinet member where we seek feedback afterwards of how did we do and how can we improve, or if it be direct feedback from the customer or the citizen, or or if it's a business organization using the end result for like water permits and operational permits.
Right. Stuff. Right.
But that was kind of like a revolutionary idea. Hey, let's go talk to them. Let's see what they think. Here, this is already integrated into the infrastructure, just again, because it's a service industry with regards to to humans.
Yeah,
It's especially here as children, that we already have those kind of structures in place where there's an entire division run by some amazing leaders that focus just on the patient experience. I believe it's even called patient experience. And they have managers and they have specialists and they have VPs that kind of actually focus on being that voice of the customers to the organization,
sure.
which was huge because that was what we, in Lean Six Sigma anyway, that's generally what we push for is including that voice of the customer through the whole process.
Right. Yeah. And I love what you pointed out there, just to make sure that our listening audience didn't miss it. When we're talking about people first in doing lean transformation in an organization, the people we're talking about most immediately are the frontline workers, are the leadership, are those. And you just mentioned you mentioned two things, it, planting the seeds so people understand where we're going and what we're trying to do, but also using data, giving people that we're expecting to work on this operational excellence thing, giving them these things is putting them first. Like, I love how we're empowering them with, hey, this is the knowledge, here's some ideas, here's the training, here's the reason why, here's what's going on, but also here's some data. Because I remember collecting, it was like, um, I have a hard time saying this because you were my mentor and boss at that time, but there was a time there for a while when I first started that I just wanted to push back against all the data we were supposed to be collecting. Like, let's just fix things. But what I ended up seeing so often is when I collected the data and gave that to the team, that like opened their eyes. It gave them an understanding of what the current situation was. But then it also, as we started training them in these things and not just telling them how to do stuff, but training them, here's some tools you can use to improve this. Then that data also gave them a kind of a launching pad to, oh, if this is where we're at now, imagine where we can be. And so I think those things, even though we don't often think about, the training and those kind of, planting that seed and helping them understand that and giving them data as a people first activity, but it certainly is, especially if you're trying to do lean with people and not to people. Like, here's some of the stuff. Both government agencies and hospitals, I'm assuming hospitals because I haven't worked in them, but I know government agencies, they have to deal with some really strict regulations and some very complex systems. So how do you think, from your experience, how can leaders balance that compliance driven processes with some people first mindset? How do you balance that?
Yeah, you listed all those certifications I have earlier: business analytics, project management, Six Sigma, Lean Six Sigma, MBA, Masters in Leadership, all this kind of stuff. There's a lot of different trains of thoughts, and there's a lot of overlap. I think the one thing, and this is the system we use at the state of Nebraska for the Center of Operational Excellence, is Lean Six Sigma. Lean Six Sigma is pretty cool because, to answer your question, how do you incorporate all that? Right? How do you take this need for success results and
Right.
still make sure that at the same time we don't leave the people behind? And I love Lean Six Sigma because it's a system where if you can even get good at the system, even if you don't understand it, it'll work. The reason being is it's based off the idea of, to get a sustainable project, like a successful project 12, 24, 36 months from now, you have to include the people who do the work. You have to include them from beginning to end.
Right.
And as you include them, and that looks different, right? When you're still engaging the front end with a sponsor, you're still kind of doing behind the doors meetings of clarifying scope and boundaries. Sure. But then you use that information, worded and presented correctly, to the project team from the very get go. And that's very unique to systems like Lean and Lean Six Sigma, uh, change management focused project managers fall in the PMP. Um, and by including that team the entire way, it's still a pretty strict process, right? We're not saying to willy nilly stuff for the sake of people being happy. The exact opposite. It's giving them a structure and a foresight into knowing exactly what comes next, to take the guesswork out of it, knowing that if we incorporate the process as it's created, it will bring them along. Even if your execution is 80% as a practitioner, the system is built by people much smarter than myself who took into all those considerations that help us achieve that. A great example, a specific example, and for those of you that are not horribly familiar with Lean Six Sigma, basically you get your project charter, your scope, your boundaries, your true north, whatever it is, your direction you're going to head. And then you map the process using little post-it notes, and you stick them on the wall. Tons of pictures of Shane
I
doing
got
here.
him over here.
Yeah, I know you had pictures. I see them on the internet. You put them on the wall, and you get the current state map. So now everybody can visually see what the process is. Well, that seems silly. Not really, though. When you have this cross-functional team of people upstream and downstream that have never, like,
Hmm.
I know my bucket of the process. I'm even guilty of this, my colonel. I know my bucket of the process. I don't know what goes on out here because it doesn't impact my paycheck, my
Right.
bonus, my performance. So I'm just going to stay focused when you stay focused on. And that's an opportunity for really like, oh my gosh, I had no idea that when I do this, it impacts them. Talk about people focused. That's that first like collaborative team humanitarian mindset of, hey, we followed the process. Now we can all visually see how we're doing. And then when you go through and use data to identify pain points, talk about something humanitarian, something people focused. How about we take away all the rumors that have accumulated over 40 years? I
Right.
don't know if you guys have seen that research where they took monkeys, they put them into like this little cage, and they put a little ladder. Then at the top of the ladder, they put a bunch of bananas. And the first group of monkeys, every time a monkey would go up there to grab a banana, they'd spray it with cold water. All of them got sprayed with cold water. And so it became a culture that the monkeys that were there would just beat up any monkey who tried to get the banana because they didn't want to get sprayed with cold water. Well, one by one, they would
Right.
take those monkeys out and place new monkeys in. The new monkeys didn't know what's going on. They go get the banana, and the other monkeys beat them up because they don't want to get sprayed with cold water. And one by one, they took all the monkeys out to where none of the original monkeys were there. There was no monkey that was ever sprayed with cold water. And they took away the bananas, and they just knew not to, whether the bananas there or not, they just knew not to go up the ladder. Nobody knew why, but they just followed that kind of historical knowledge, that
Right.
historical like mindset. And that, I think that's a great analogy to, and that's real research, but I think that's a great analogy to the organization of, let's break that down. Why do we do this? Here's a process map. Can anybody tell me why we do this? And that helps people understand and question themselves. And that can be a tough process.
Yeah.
Again, be people focused is not always about feeling great. I mean, I think sometimes that's where people get this kind of, you know, hey, there is a difference between getting results and being people focused. I know why, because some people are so people focused, they don't get results. Or some people are so results, they don't get people focused. And the problem is if you mix them together, that's actually what we're trying to do.
Right.
And then we collect data. Hey, is that really an issue, Joe? You said that's an issue. The data suggests it's not an issue. Tell me why you think it's an issue. Oh, the person that trained you told you. Oh, well, okay. Who trained him? You did. Why is it an issue? Oh, the person trained you told you. Is your trainer left 20 years ago? Oh, well. So I guess the question is it still an issue, right? And then we go through, and then like we eventually we come to like what better looks like. And this is the clear distinction for me, like how a process, because it just happened here recently in my job, where being people focused can be very process oriented. It can be very rewarding from that check the box perspective too, and still be people focused.
Yeah.
There's a process called clean sheet redesign, where basically you've discussed your failure modes, your problems, your pain points, your opportunities, whatever you want to call them. You've discussed what needs fixed, and you kind of discussed like what needs to be done to make it better. Well, in clean sheet redesign, you break into two groups, three groups, four groups. You break into groups, and you assign failure modes, and you all come up with your own future state maps focused on those opportunities unique to each group. And then you come back together and kind of mush it together, have the discussion, scrimmage it out, but then you kind of put it together and you come up with your future state map. And that's a map that the team came up with. I had an engineer one time. He's a high level executive, great guy, really good executive. He was kind of a role model for me, kind of as worked at the state. Super smart, but he's an engineer, right? And so in engineering, they learn redesign, but they don't learn like Lean Six Sigma redesign. They learn like engineering redesign. And he told me, hey, Matt, that seems like a giant waste of time. Can we just skip it? Now, I know what he's saying is, again, that's that kind of
Right.
numbers and results oriented. Hey, time is money, and we need to get this done. True. That's not a false statement. He isn't wrong. But I think where we need to, like this whole like people versus results discussion, I think where we need to take it is it's an investment. We are investing that extra resources of time and energy to be people focused because, and as an executive, this is kind of where the money is, because if we do so, the solution we come up with when implemented will be more sustainable. So even when you're no longer with the organization or you're
Right.
just too busy focusing on other stuff, that solution will still be implemented. Why? Because the people that did the work are the ones that came up with the solution and they want to do what they came up with themselves. So again, to me, in my mind, I see those two kind of people focused with no real results. We've seen that. We've all seen that. And hey, two results driven and the attrition rate is like 300%. I think we've all seen that too. And
Yeah.
surveys and attrition rates are also great, kind of metrics to follow. But again, I think if you find a solid system like, change oriented project management, Lean Six Sigma, even pure Lean with some structure and gumption to it, I think, and there's several others too. Don't get me wrong. You can be Agile Scrum practitioner. It's very much about figuring out how to make what system you have, whatever one you use, total quality management, you know, uh, and really focus on how you can integrate it to the process, being focused on benefiting the people.
Yeah, I mean, you made me think of a couple things. One, I remember the training that you put us through when we first came in, and this was intense training, ladies and gentlemen. This was 2 weeks, 8 hours a day. Every day we were going there, we were learning things, we were being drilled every day, to give us the principles, but also the tools and everything that was involved that we needed to really to do what we were supposed to do for the state. But you drilled in so many times and so well that it's not about me as the facilitator and as the leader of whatever process improvement thing we're doing. I i give the tools and step out of the way so that when I leave, they're not going to be pointing to, well, where's that guy that's supposed to be doing this is his thing, or her thing, whatever it was. And the other thing that you made me think of as we were talking, especially in reference to balancing compliance driven processes with people first mindset, is we had again drilled into us the three questions we had, the value questions, of, hey, does this step, and after we would map it out, I remember going through each of them, training the team how to do this, all the frontline workers had to do this, and then having them come up and ask the question for each of these steps that we have up there: does this transform the product or service? Is it done right the first time? Is the customer willing to pay for it? If it didn't have any of those, or if any of those were a no, we had that second layer, which is really goes to the compliance thing. Is this a requirement, a statutory requirement? And
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
having that idea safeguards and gives the team, the boundaries they need to have to be able to reimagine and redesign, like you were talking about. Because they knew that if we can ask those questions and really think about that and make sure, if it was required, if this was a compliance thing that statutorily or regulatory, we needed to have, we keep it in. But everything else is open for a reimagining of how we can do it. And doing that was a great marriage, like you were talking about, Lean Six Sigma being great about, hey, let's look at how we can make this process better, but let's also focus on what's going to be best for the people. And I think a what I want to make sure that we communicate with our audience and just together is that when we do process improvement, there is an external customer, there is an end result customer. But where I'm at right now, in doing the consulting work that I'm doing and seeing all of these people that, are facing burnout, that are facing disengagement, can we make the work better for them? Not just the end result, because, and again, something you drilled into my head years ago was sometimes the customer isn't that final customer. It's not that final external. It may not be, you know, Joe who's walking his dog down the street who wants the sidewalk, and make sure the sidewalk's taken care of. It might be the downstream. It might be the upstream. Can we make our processes better for the people that have to do them so that we can get better quality
Yeah.
to our customers. And just that idea of putting people first in that way, I think, it is amazing.
Well, and you mentioned too, like the voice of the customer, and you talk about things like business value added. Well, it's funny because I think that's a term people like to throw around, voice of customer, and great. I think that is definitely one of the primary steps we need to do is look at continuous improvement from a customer's perspective. But what is a
Right.
customer, right? You should break it down. There are internal customers, there are external customers. There's something called voice of the employee. It's part of voice of the customer. It's actually a voice of the employee. And so if you're an organization like Children's has a pretty respectable like regulation team, like accreditation regulation team that oversees that stuff. I know the state had the auditor's office, and they had, of course, people internally to each agency
Right.
that would oversee that stuff, usually administrator role or something. But if we include them with the other customers into that project, and we empower them the same way we empower everyone's equal in that project. We might have different titles and different responsibilities, but our voice is equal. I think that's how we get to where, hey, is this regulation? Is this something we can change? No. Okay. Moving on. That stays,
Right.
guys. Let's move to the
Right.
next
That,
one.
that stays.
It gives
Yeah.
them the opportunity to have that discussion, and Shane's done this several times. I don't know if he's told the regular viewers this before, where he's done some projects with agencies where we asked that exact question. We said, hey, is this something we can change? And they're like, absolutely not. Nope. There is no way this can be changed. And Shane had the courage to ask the question, why not?
Why not?
And nobody could really answer.
Why?
And so he investigated, long story short, through that kind of continual effort of, again, being very people focused. Shane's
Right.
probably the most people focused person I ever met. But being very people focused, he still took that kind of drive forward, asked those 5 whys, 6 whys, 7 whys over and over again as to why can't we? Why would you say that? And he ended up getting regulations changed by working with the executive leaders of the agency he was working with.
Right.
He figured out that, what? This policy can be changed, and it is a lengthy process, and it was probably tedious for Shane because I put a lot of
Yeah.
work into it. You did,
Yeah.
but he ended up actually changing the regulations that couldn't be changed. And so I think that's a kind of like, did he have to do that? No. Do you have to do that? No, not necessarily. But I think that's that level. If you're truly looking at it from a customer's perspective, things like regulations, yeah, they are important. But I think what's more important to all the customers is it truly apply to us, right? I mean, all the time we see these things with different legal representation, whether it be in government or healthcare. Let's go talk to legal and see if the previous interpretation still applies 20 years later. Because we've had
Right.
advance of technology, we've had advancements in society as a whole. There's new political stuff all over the world. Does this still mean the same thing? I don't know if Shane's brought it up, and I'll keep talking. So feel free to interrupt if you want to. But we had regulations early on that we worked with that was talking about communism. Like every other line, and this was in government, was talking about communism and using terminology that apparently decades ago was appropriate when talking about communism. And we looked at the regulations in 2000, I don't know, 20 maybe, 2022, something like this. It wasn't that long ago. And we looked at
Right.
the regulations and realized not only is this verbiage very vague today, though it probably made perfect sense back then, is very vague today. Like we're asking for a reinterpretation of how do we look at this now? And a lot of times, I'd say at least half the times, they said, you know what, you're right. This lawyer in the position now who can make that determination says it is something we can move forward with a different interpretation. And so that's kind of, if you're people focused but results focused, again, I think they go hand in hand. I really think they do. Is, well, wait a minute, why? And I think Shane's a great example, probably better than me at this, of keeping that curiosity, like that genuine curiosity and sense of, explain to me. I
Right.
got 5 minutes. Explain
Right.
to me why it has to be done that way. And at first, people generally get offended, right? I know I do sometimes when Shane would do it to me. It's always fun seeing the people you taught do it back to you. You're like, oh, well, that is really impactful. That's really cool. It works too. But like when they challenge your whys, if you can do it in a way where you're truly just curious about life and trying to figure out why we do it that way, sometimes you might come back to, nope, can't change it. Check legal, still can't change it. Check leaders, nope, can't change it.
Yeah.
Okay, now we know. And that's okay too, right? But at
Yeah.
least we investigated the core root of everything.
Right. And just a little side note to that, it's incredibly helpful because we've talked a lot on this podcast about lean transformation, starting with the leadership and the leadership providing cover. And what you just described is some of the cover leadership can provide, not just for being a champion, but also leadership saying, hey, we're going to allow you this asset, the legal side of things. If you come across, some kind of regulation or something that doesn't make sense and that doesn't seem to improve the quality or the worker experience to this process, let's take it up with them. Here's a resource you could send it to, and that's just another. I don't want to say it's a simple thing, because it was pretty profound, but it is a great thing about that. Okay, I want to keep moving forward here, and I got another question. Let's see where I'm trying to choose now because I have too many questions and we're starting to run out of time. So let's talk about healthcare now, because we've talked a lot about government work. In healthcare. That's a very high stakes environment, right? Patient care is critical. How do you ensure, or how can leaderships or organization ensure that putting employees first leads to a better outcome for the patients?
It's a good question. One of the things I'm working on here at Children's is I report to the Chief Quality Officer, Dr. Maloney. Great guy. He has doctor's degree. He's been a doctor for many years. He has a PhD in something related to healthcare management as well. A very intelligent guy, been around for quite a while in the industry. And he's a perfect example of kind of that combination of healthcare of how do you drive results? How do you look at systems? How do you look at infrastructure? While also, we're doing it because of the people, our employees, but also our patients and our patients' family and our patients' family, the people they impact. Like it all kind of comes together. Like you can't categorize this stuff. And that's why when him and I started having our discussions, we decided that it might be a good idea to take a look at creating a Lean Six Sigma green belt for Children's Nebraska. And it's going to be, because again, that particular methodology, and a lot of them are good ones. There's a lot of other methodologies used, but the goal of using the Lean Six Sigma is to, again, kind of bring that structure together of training people, not a class, not just an online class says, hey guys, this is why improvement's important for our customer, right? But showing them real results. We're kind of in that process where we're partnering with the University of Nebraska, Omaha. We're looking at what kind of collaboration efforts that can look like for the certification in healthcare, but then like, how does that help students? Because we know those students might one day be teammates here at Children's, or they could be customers here at Children's, or they might be able to help us with another partnership with a different institution. So it really it goes back to that community building. But that Lean Six Sigma program we're launching is going to follow all the same principles of people first, but results. And again, it comes back to what Shane was talking about earlier: sponsorship. You got to set the realistic goals based off of who your sponsor is. I've had a huge blessing in my last role working directly for the governor, who's now a senator for the United States, but also now I get to work directly with the Chief Quality Officer and other officers of the organization. That's helpful because they are people too. They go home, they have families, they have hobbies, they go camping, and so I kind of look at this people first mindset continuous improvement as well. If they're people too, then how do we help them do what they do, right? Like when I say my prayers in the morning, it's about how do I provide my services and my abilities, my talent to support their efforts, because they didn't get there by not caring, right? There's no executive at Children's that got there by not caring about customers. Every single one of them cares deeply emotionally on a personal level. And I'm sure you could say that about pretty much any organization you're in. You're probably going to find people that deeply care about the goals of that organization. And so again, then how do I use my skill set to make them the best version they can be of them for this topic, for whatever topic I'm assigned to? But then also using structure to do it. In this environment, healthcare, it's really interesting because everybody has multiple master's degrees. We mentioned all degrees and certifications I have. It's like a letter salad after these.
It is.
And to be quite frankly, that's normal here. In healthcare, everyone has multiple degrees and certifications. They all have 30 master's degrees and they know their topics well. But I think the benefit, a lot of people that would listen to a podcast like this, it can be kind of intimidating. I think one of the benefits is Most are not trained in project management or Lean Six Sigma, or if they are, not to the extent that you are. That's what you're doing is you're spending either your free time or you've had somebody at work allow you to spend your time watching this at work to learn more about the industry. And the knowledge you gain here with like Shane and Patrick on this podcast, um, you like to read maybe some Deming books, wherever you're gaining and absorbing your information, that's stuff that they haven't necessarily been exposed to at the same level that you have. And so, what I would encourage you guys to do, if your goal is to be people first, people oriented, but still produce results, still be compliant with regulations and policies, is think about those leaders you can help support in their efforts in the
Right.
organization. And that doesn't mean that they have to see the world the same way as you, but just kind of respect the fact that they got to where they are and they have the ability, that sponsorship ability to support your efforts. And I think what you're probably going to see, I've noticed this in 20, 30, 40 different organizations I've done stuff in. Once you start getting results and you highlight those results, it becomes an easier buy-in.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're blessed enough to have that first initial sponsor, so at Children's it's Dr. Maloney, and other VPs here that all support it. At the state, it was multiple leaders like Jace Jackson, Governor Matt Millenberger, all these people, Tony Goines. You know, it's easier to kind of rally around that by showing results because then we're not this weird little lean tribe or cult in the corner talking about how
Right.
our magical system is going to make the world better for everybody. Because what happens is you get those results, and I kid you not, if you're truly people focused and again following the systems and processes, getting those results, their job's easier. They're getting more work done. They can now
Right.
take a little bit of a real lunch break without stress, without having an ulcer. They
Right.
can relax and talk to coworkers for the first time in 10 years. You want to talk about people focus and results, get the results using people for the people and it will spread like wildfire. And Shane's experienced this. I've experienced. A lot of you listening probably experienced. Is you get those results, and it's like investing. When you invest, you put in $100, compounding annual interest. Well, the first year you gain $10 at 10%. The next year it's more than that. Next year it's more than that because it keeps adding back to the principal. Same thing with process improvement, especially when it's people focused. I
Right.
just intensely fold when people focused is you get those one or two solid projects where you show people that it impacts their lives and the organization and the customer and the employees and all this stuff. Follow a solid methodology, it'll happen. When you do that and you kind of communicate that, don't be too modest. Do get out there and communicate that. Be the salesman of the idea of the marriage between results and people. Because they're not two separate entities. Results is the people, and people are the results. Like that's how we further any organization, especially healthcare and
Yeah.
government.
Right. And I also want to add, because we're as you were talking there toward the end, what it made me think of is the capacity we were able to open up. I'm sure you're doing similar things there at Children's Nebraska. The capacity we're able to open up for the frontline workers by taking something that, for instance, took 19 days, now takes 2 days to do. Just frees them up. Now, that doesn't mean, however, because if we're going to be people first, it doesn't mean we just cram more and more work at them. We, being having an understanding of when to put the throttle down and when to possibly back up. Hey, now there's more capacity. Oh, great, let's just throw more things at you. But instead, understanding, okay, you now have more capacity. You don't have to do some of this stuff that we took out was waste, that didn't add value. Now let's just have you focus on the value activities that you already have. So I think that's a just another little side thought that I had about that. Doing continuous improvement isn't about trying to get more stuff done. It's also about getting more stuff done better, but taking care of the people is a huge part of that as well. So let me give one last question to you, Matt, here, and we'll wrap this up. But as we're talking about, it's one thing to start prioritizing people and to have that focus, in continuous improvement. It's another thing to make it stick. So what are some ways leaders and organizations might be able to sustain this people first approach for the long term?
Gosh, that's a good question. I bet you could ask every single person you have on here, and you
Yeah,
probably
and
get
there's going to be
several good
something.
results from everybody.
Right.
That's a good one. I can tell you this, where my mind's at. I could go into some of the, I'd call them cliche. They're not. They work too. There's other things like bonus systems based off of performance. There's things like internal promotions and stuff like this. That's good stuff too. At one point in my career, that probably would have been my response. I will say this now. I have the opportunity to work with several transformational leaders right now. Just don't know what transformational leadership is, just Google it. Totally cool. Shane probably talks about it a lot. It's that type of leadership that just really changes a community. Things like President Reagan or President Obama. Things like people that really just change the entire name of the game. And at Children's here, we have several good ones. Renee, she's over behavioral health. Dr. Maloney, he's quality and I believe also on the medical side of it. Several good leaders. And it's interesting because the tone they set, not just in meetings, right? Everybody knows to be professional in meetings. I mean, yes, that's important. But some of these one-on-ones, being in the game for decades, I've had several one-on-ones with leaders that in meetings will be very professional. And then you get them one-on-one and they'll just be, just kind of anger or stress or anxiety or whatever it is, they kind of represent that. But I think when you have transformational leaders, whether it's you in the interactions with other people or it's the leaders' interactions with you, when they lead by example, when they consistently handle that stress, we all have our moments. I'm not worried about that, but I'm just saying, like, and Shane and I have had a couple of moments where he's like, "Hey, man, gotcha."
No,
Right?
no.
I mean, that's just part of being an executive, right? It's very stressful sometimes. There's multiple
Right.
priorities, multiple agendas, and they're not bad agendas. I don't mean that negatively. I mean, there's a lot of that's why we have different divisions and this kind of stuff. And so that's there. And so again, going back to supporting them to the best of your ability, but then also when they kind of receive that feedback, they give feedback, they take feedback, they lead by example, they are the representation of all those kind of organizational values and beliefs that they list. Like at Children's, they truly live it. I can say that. And at the state, we were blessed to have a lot of leaders when we worked there that were just walking examples of that stuff.
Right.
I think when they see that, that's helpful because then it radiates. And then if you can be kind of a receptor for that or some kind of amplifier for that, and even, it's called mirroring from a body language perspective, even mirror some of that behavior or repeat some of that behavior you see them doing, which I'm trying to do now in my current role, is taking like, hey, wow, they're really impactful. I wonder if I have the ability to react that way to stress in my meetings, right? Or, hey, gosh, whoa, I'll give you a great example. I did a data analysis not too long ago on an Excel spreadsheet. I'm not a huge fan of Excels. I've used Excel for a long time, and frankly, you kind of have to be in this industry. If you're not good at it, get good at it. I'm pretty decent at it. I put something together and I sent it to my current boss, and the information was legit. It was good. Formatting was good. My spelling, as Shane can tell you, or anyone who's ever worked with me can tell you, is if it's not on Word with spell check, or we're gonna have to have a talk with me. And he had the talk. He had it with me, but he didn't do it like aggressively. He didn't do it like, "Hey, you screwed up." He's like, they have ways to fix this, right? He's like, there are things you can download to run it through before you send it to me. And
Yeah.
when you address that just really kind of opened me up to that idea of, or maybe remind me, I'm not sure, but that idea of how we address those stressors, those problems, because I think that's really set the tone for me to be people first when we address those failure modes or pain points or opportunities, whatever we want to call them. But
Yeah.
those areas for improvement, especially when it's team oriented, right? If you haven't done a lot of projects, which you're going to come across, and if you have, you know it resonates with some past projects. Sometimes there are like these things that are team oriented, that are people oriented, that need to be addressed. They're elephants in the room that have been sitting there for 20 years, and we got to discuss it. Maybe we need to change our virtue. Maybe we need to change a training program that somebody created and that they're really proud of. Maybe we need to make adjustments to policy that is kind of like sacred policy or whatever. Or maybe we just need to give feedback to our peers, which sounds easy, but is not always
Yeah.
easy, right?
Yep.
And so that's kind of one of those things where the original question was like, how do you
How do
make
we sustain?
sustainable culture across
Right.
long
Yeah.
term? we'd mentioned the process earlier of Lean Six Sigma and including people for sustainability of the actual process we fix. Yes, yes. But the culture piece, lead by example and surround yourself by people who also lead by example. And it's not a bunch of robots all acting the same way, but if you do it well or even close to well, and I think Shane and I are great examples of it, and a lot of people we got to work with, is you start complimenting one another. And then you come like this, like the little Westerns, like this big posse of positivity, but also results and accountability, and it all goes together. And then you get more people on board as you go. And before you know it, you have an entire organization, and that's pretty hard to wipe out an entire organization or even a half of it or even a third of it of this people result driven culture. It sounds kind of cliche as I say it, even I hear myself say it, I'm thinking it, but it's absolutely true. And that's how it works in my experience, that 20 some years of start small and grow big, start a fire and let it kind of grow.
Yeah, that's awesome. Matt, thank you so much for being with us here and for sharing your knowledge. It's been great to be able to catch up again. If people wanted to connect with you, maybe they have some other questions. How could they? What would be your preference for connecting with you?
Yeah, my email is MATT, so Matt, no spaces. M is in Matthew, E is in Ethan, B is in Bianca, E is in Ethan, at gmail.com. So Matt Mebe, it's the name of my company, Matt Mebe at gmail.com. Send me an email. I love touching base. I love helping people in their paths, even if it's just a recommendation, some feedback. You just want to chat. If you want to correct me, if you heard something you don't agree with, feel free to let me know how it's supposed to be. I'm okay with that. But please reach out if you have any further discussion.
Yeah. Now, what about LinkedIn? Are you on LinkedIn as well?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and also if you guys want to explore some of the extremely successful projects and initiatives that Shane and I have worked on in the past, there's a Harvard case study that there's a link to it on my LinkedIn. Harvard did a piece on us and how we created into the Center of Operational Excellence. Also, there's several publications from like Religion and some others where books and articles. Politico did an article on it. There's all sorts of resources that have discussed specifically stuff we've worked on in the past. So feel free to check it out, and there should be more resources there for you on LinkedIn. Thank you for bringing that up. I forgot about that.
Yeah. No, yeah. I'm also thinking that. So just Matt Singh, your LinkedIn. That's how. And for those that are listening, it is SINGH. For finding, if you want to find him on LinkedIn. Matt, thanks so much. Ladies and gentlemen, we really appreciate you your listening and hope that you were able to glean something from it. Let us know if you have any questions or comments. Thanks and have a great day.